Thank you guys for being here. I know it's the last session of the day, so you're super tired and ready to get a drink or home, whatever. This session is one I've been looking forward to all day. I'm gonna let these lovely ladies introduce themselves. The half sheets, if you can fill them out, you can drop them up here. If you happen to leave early, or you can catch me at the end of the session. Give them your undivided attention.
Thank you so much, Desiree. Again, thank you for your time. We want some drinks too, so we'll get through this. Before we begin,
there would be drinks here.
you know, you right?
Well,
But thank you again. We're gonna really dive into a topic that may be a little confusing for some people. I know the title is a little jarring, but it's okay. It's gonna be fun. All I'm gonna ask of you is that you keep an open mind, that you really take the time to really understand the approach that we're coming from, or understand the perspective that we're coming from, so that you can be more effective in the field in DFW. So the topic is hood politics and peremptory equity. We're going to be discussing planning, engaging, and activating marginalized communities. Today I'm joined by my colleagues, Wafia Murray. She's the program manager of the Better Bike Share program in the city of Philadelphia. We have Christina Glancy of At First Glance. She's an outreach and marketing specialist. And then there's me. I'm an urban planner in the DC region. So today, what we will cover, we'll just start by unpacking the problem. What is hood politics and what is peremptory equity? We'll look at what planning is today, what that's been like, but what it means to shift the narrative as far as hood politics, and then what is hood politics, how you get into it, how you operate within that. So, what we will not do, okay, we will not go too deep on this. So this discussion, even though it is kind of deep and it is new for you, it is pretty high level of engagement. If you want to go deeper into the discussion, you can, of course, meet with us afterwards. We're not striving to give you another skill set, but we're trying to help you shift your perspective on how you engage certain communities. And lastly, we will not tolerate or support disrespect. So again, have an open mind. As planners, we're always expecting the public to have an open mind with us, so we expect the same from you. So let's get right into it. Make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. But no, what's the word? Why are we discussing hood politics? Right now, the huge buzzword in the planning world is gentrification. Now, at face value, gentrification is not a bad thing, but depending on who hears it, it has a different connotation. So we already know as planners, gentrification is the process of repairing and rebuilding homes and businesses in a deteriorating area. But just think of it as another attempt at urban renewal. It's just a new name. But even though gentrification is well-intentioned, sometimes it's not executed well and the impact is not what we intended it to be. We all want neighborhood improvements and efficiency and things like that, but all of that is not exclusive to one group. Everyone in a gentrified community should be able to benefit from this. So the hood, they enjoy the same things that gentrified neighborhoods are experiencing. They like green spaces, they like places to gather and to show support for people. They like bike lanes, yes, people like riding bikes. They like the beautiful, affordable homes, and even access to the different professional and social services that are brought into these neighborhoods. But again, however, some of these upgrades are not meant for the people that are already existing there. Now, we won't go too much deeper into what gentrification is. We'll save that for our colleagues at another conference. We'll see you at APA in April. But it is important to note that gentrification is a triggering word for certain communities. Now, Jared Walker, many gentrified communities experience what Jared Walker deems to be elitist projection. So essentially, the planners and all the decision makers, the people who have power to implement what they're trying to do, they pretty much say this is what the community needs and that's it, and it's only from their perspective. They're not really taking into account the needs of the people who they're planning for. And though that's well-intentioned most of the time, like I said, it's not really taking into account the things that people really need. So when the hood hears gentrification, they're thinking Whole Foods, bike lanes, Bishop Arts, unaffordable housing. My rent just went up $6,000. Starbucks is here, and now I can't wear tennis shoes to my favorite club. So essentially, all they hear is, this isn't for me. Now I'm mad. Grandma is no longer down the street. My barbershop is gone, and even though the neighborhood looks nice, this is not for me. And how did that end up happening? Well, let's take a little walk down history lane, okay? So I won't go too deep into what happened just through the planning period, but we started off just beautifying the city as a way to address the social issues that was happening around us. And it took us some time to realize it, but we realized that just because that building is cute, that doesn't mean my bills got paid, that rent was taken care of, or that any needs were addressed. We had to go a little bit deeper and further, and that's how we came across rational comprehensive planning. That essentially looked at science as the way to think. If you want to make the city better, if you want to address social issues, go ahead and do all the research before you start implementing the project so that you choose the absolute best outcome. Now, even though that's great, we do need to do our research and things, sometimes that just wasn't enough, which brought us to advocacy and equity. The great trailblazer, Paul Davidoff, he realized that sometimes your opinion doesn't matter in planning. There's other interests, and just because you're a planner, that doesn't mean your values and your needs are what reflect, or it doesn't reflect what the other communities need. So you need to represent these communities. Definitely have your biases, have your opinions and values, but make sure when you're doing that, that you're advocating for the people who have the same values as you, who may not have as much power as you do. Now, of course, there were some flaws in that because, you're an advocate, so you're speaking on behalf of these people, but those people still don't have any power to implement what they're trying to see in their community, which is where equity planning came in. Now, equity planning, it was great. It gave a little more voice to the people, but it still didn't put the power into the community's hand like it intended to do. It was still very much a top-down approach, and planners were acting on behalf of the community. So moving back into the 90s and 80s, we have transactive planning. People started to have the discussion more. What do you want? What do you like in your communities? Do you want to see a green space? What languages do you speak? We started to recognize more that people have different values, different issues, and then different life approaches. And just because we had life outcomes were not based on race, your social background, or anything like that. We had more of a conversation. We were open to recognize each other as human beings, which brings us to today, multicultural and postmodernity. Again, we all recognize that we're different, but we're trying to do a little more and making sure that people are heard and that we're included in the social space. But at the same time, these communities, even though they're attending the public meetings sometimes, those public meetings are not for them. They don't understand the technical lingo. Sometimes they can't even get to the meetings. I won't call out any city names, but some cities have some public meetings at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday and wonder why the community is not out having the discussion or really providing their input. So that's where peremptory equity comes in. What is that? What's the word? Peremptory, just on a textbook definition, it's insisting on immediate attention and obedience, and when you look at it from a law perspective, you're not open to appeal or challenge. What is equity? The quality of being fair and impartial. So what am I saying when I put those two words together? Oh wait, let's get the part. Going back to the multicultural thing and understanding the values that already exist in the community. Recently in DC, it's been a huge problem of gentrification as everywhere else. But the elitist projection has been intense to the point where they've been trying to silence the culture that have already existed there. So the Don't Mute DC movement, there was a block in DC where this particular store, they always played this really loud go-go music. Like you could hear it blocks away, coming from either direction. And all of the people that were moving into the area, they're like, whoa, it's too loud, you need to turn this music down. But that community has been doing it for like 60 years. Yeah. So how dare you come into this community and tell me I can't play my music? You just moved here, this is not your community only. And then we had the Howard situation. With the influx of people coming into the community, people love their dogs. In DC, they really love their dogs. But they started walking their dogs on a historically black campus, which is fine, that's not a problem. But you have dogs, handling their business all across campus. And for a lot of Howard is a historically black community, or a historically black college. And it holds a lot of weight for the black community, not just because they're the engineers, they're the doctors, they're the entertainers and things. That's where a lot of black Greek organizations were founded. So Delta Sigma Theta, Alpha, Kappa Alpha, have y'all heard of any of those? Yep. Maybe not, go back and do research. But those movements were very, very influential in just the civil rights movement and just moving black people forward. So for the new community to come in and just walk their dogs on these campuses and allow them to poop everywhere is extremely disrespectful. That's just like me coming to your yard and popping a squat. And you're mad because you're mad. So, going back to peremptory equity, what does that mean? Essentially, you need to include the equity process as it is. Like, this is not a drill. The marginalized communities, they're demanding that you respect them as people first, that you recognize their values, and include them in the planning process, not just to provide feedback, but to actually give them the tools to do what they need to do. They're already powerful, they already have the tools, the thing and the systems that they have in place, it's been working for a while. Now, yes, do they have improvements that they can make? Absolutely. But don't come in as the expert thinking that you have all the ideas and that only your way is right. Their way is right too. There's an opportunity to meet in the middle to, accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. So, in this conversation, this is not a drill. This is not a game. This is not up for debate. You are required as planners to include these people in your process. No longer can you have these 2 p.m. Tuesday meetings for the public. If you decide to do that, you need to make sure, okay, scrap it. You can't do that anymore. This is not, like I said, yeah, this is not a drill. Like, you need to provide every opportunity for these people to be involved in the process. So if it means you need to extend your deadline on the project implementation, you need to be able to include enough time in that process to really educate these people and show them how to do GIS. Show them what curb bump outs mean so that they can provide what they need for their community and let you really know what's next and how they want their community to look in the future. So moving forward, we're gonna talk about shifting the narrative. We're gonna have Christina lead us through that.
Hey everyone. Drop this real quick. Okay. So I'm not a planner, let's preface that. But I work with planners to help them create the best strategy to work with their people, whoever that may be, like the clients and the community. So what I ask of you now is to humanize the process. I'm gonna ask you to leave your titles at the door and just be a human right now, because that's who I need to speak to. And ultimately, the bridging of the communication gap, it starts with you. You being a human, that's how we connect, because that's how I'm gonna connect with you. I'm not a planner, so I don't know those languages, and I expect the same from you. So I wanna talk about this concept from a self, space, and people perspective. So Christy and I, in our past life, we worked on this project in DC called Langston Golf Course. And our task that we were given, just popped on our desk, was we had to identify what happened between the community and what happened to the community and the golf course. And it turns out, doing our research, we were like, okay, community doesn't like going to the golf course because they were cut off by a gate. That's it, easy. We're gonna go in this community, we're gonna change the world, right? So we did this sociology project, we did our research, we had a group of interns where we decided to just walk the community grounds, talk to people just on a whim. And what we found out was way more than what Google could tell us. And they don't go back into the golf course because of like violence happening. And they didn't just cut them off from the golf course, they cut them off from the entire national park. So we had to check ourselves. We couldn't go in there with our titles, we had to go in there as a human and really our upbringings. Because Christy and I are not from DC, we had to leverage our students that were from DC to build those connections for us, and then they opened the gate for us to have the conversations with our community to build the change that we needed to, right? So we had to check ourselves then. And then we really had to be conscious of the space that we were walking into, because like if we were to just go off of the information that we got from our clients, we would have heard the community is a underserved community, it's violent, the police are only there on this certain block because they arrest everybody, right? But when we went in there, we realized that the people in the community, they're very community oriented. They have festivals, they talk to each other. Yes, violence is a part of it, but that's the only narrative that we were given as, and that was shed to the public. So we had to understand that we had to navigate the space again as a human and go in there like, hey, how are you because it's Wednesday? not, I need you to sign off on this paper because our client said that you need to do this. So we really had to take a step back and check ourselves in that perspective. And then, like I said before, we had to be people, because I know there was this one lady, her name was Miss DJ. She wouldn't talk to us until we told her like our backgrounds, like who's your mom, this and that. Like she wanted to know our credentials before we would talk to her. She's like, I have a 412 number, and DC is very, very critical about calling. So I had to call her and talk to her, and she's like, why do you have a 412 number? Why isn't it 202? And I'm like, because I'm not paying $36 to change my number. And she's like, well, let's talk about this real quick. We love people from Pennsylvania, but I don't want to talk to you until I find out who your dad is, who your mom is, how I can figure out this. And I'm like, wow, this is really a lot of information that you're asking from me. But it really made me realize that people operate on the human dimension. And we had to step back. And the process ended up getting cut because of information that we didn't have. But we built the relationships with the community to deliver them that advice. So it wasn't like we created a mistrust. That project was like 2 years ago, and we could still go into their communities, the Langston Day now, and it still be all love. And we did that because we had a human connection with them. So I say that to just help you guys shift the narrative of when you go into these communities, connect with them on a human level. And just realize how those three factors correlate. So I wanted to ask you guys the question of like, what side are you on? Who goes into neighborhoods just like, hey, my name is this and I work for this person? You do? Anybody else? Nobody? Why do you choose that route?
What, when you're in context, do you mean like when you're going out to your community or to a community you're working with or for?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Why do you preface it with your title first?
Well, not necessarily my title, but, I wouldn't say I necessarily preface it with my title, but I do say who I'm with or representing in that sense. Well, I think one, so that they understand why I'm maybe approaching them, whether, and in most cases, I think it's because I want to ask them information and to, hopefully that there will be a sense of trust in approaching them, so they're not automatically like, okay, who is this stranger just coming up to me and just asking the questions. So if you preface it by like, hey, my name is so-and-so, I'm with so-and-so city, or I'm with so-and-so organization, whatever that may be, then there hopefully will be a sense of trust. Depending on who the other person on the other side is, there may be some distrust automatically by giving them your title and or the organization you're with. Depending on where you're at, I suppose.
Why do you?
Well, I guess I approach it differently. I just go start talking to them, and I go, oh, how long have you lived here? And I mean, we don't introduce ourselves like at the beginning anyway. I'm just like, oh, hi. And usually we're there for the same common reason, so it's either to get something or whatever. And then I just start talking to them. And I just say, hey, how long have you lived here? And I don't tell them I'm a planner until actually after I ask questions like, what do you like about our city and stuff? And I keep it kind of where they don't know who I am, because I really want them to be honest with me. And I think, I try to approach it a little different, because I want the honesty. I don't want them to think, oh, she's planner city, oh, I don't want to talk to her.
Yeah.
And so I don't do it that way. I kind of try to develop a rapport or some commonality, and I really want to know what they think of the city personally, and not just, oh, yeah, I like it. No, I want to know what you think personally, or
How you interact with the city.
yeah, sometimes there's a project, and I go, oh, did you see the new mural that we painted or whatever? And they're like, oh, I don't like it. And I'm like, why not? I didn't say I was at the city yet, and I didn't tell them I was the artist that painted it. I didn't tell them.
Love that part.
Yeah, but I kind of want to just find out truth, I guess, honestly.
Thank you.
I introduce myself first because I'm in Texas and everybody's got a gun.
Oh.
They shoot first and ask questions later.
That's not something I deal with, so I understand.
Yeah, so I remember when I was working in several cities that I've worked for, I worked with annexation and people don't want to be annexed. So I have to introduce myself. I'm John Matthews, I'm with the city of whatever. So don't shoot me.
Somebody's coming.
And I think it just kind of I think it just depends on the context, right, and what you're going for.
Mhm.
Because I agree, I mean, if you're going to find information, if you're not like trying to covertly trying to find out information, but you want them to be truthful, you're right. I mean, you don't want to approach them and say I'm with the city, because they're automatically gonna be like, well, I gotta talk around eggshells because I don't wanna offend, or, you know, so I think it just depends on the context that you're in and what you're going there for.
I agree. I'm glad that you went there. I asked you that question because when I work with my planners and my engineers to go to the communities, I approach it from 3 different angles. I ask them about the narrative that they're telling themselves or what they've heard about the place, so they can identify that and either dismantle it through the process after they actually they interact with the community, because that's what I found when I was doing outreach with Langston. I'm gonna ask them from like an energy perspective. Like, are you going into the space of, I'm the subject matter expert, you can't tell me anything? Did you already decide the end goal before you go into the community to find it out? Because oftentimes when my engineers and my planners do that, the project doesn't end up getting to that because they know everything, right?
The engineer, that's why.
Well, that's another story, that's a whole other planet, like a whole other panel. We can talk for days for that. And then the language, what I've also found is that when you go into a community, regardless of their education, their socioeconomic status, if you go in there speaking your planner language, they don't understand. And even if it's not a planner and you're a human, like some of for example, I'm from Pittsburgh. When I talk to Christy, there are certain words that she says that I don't know what she's talking about. We're speaking the same language, we both speak English, but I don't understand what she's saying because she comes from a different context. And that's the same context that I want to remind everybody to do when they go into the communities. Don't automatically think that these people don't understand because they're not intelligent. That's a narrative that you're creating about them and you're not trying to connect with them. So that's what I wanted you guys to, like, the thought that I want you guys to think when you go into the communities. And then just have communication throughout. Next question that I wanted to pose is like, how do you build trust with your community?
I think a good way of building trust with the community is not going into that community, asking them what they think about something, letting them give you all these ideas, and then not enacting it. That builds mistrust in the community because they start to believe that, well, what's the point of me coming and chatting with you and telling you guys my thoughts, or you guys going through this really great PowerPoint, and then all my thoughts and ideas that I done sat up and gave you, you're not even acknowledging them.
Yeah.
And that's difficult for a planner because we can't do everything.
Yep.
And it's political in a way. But, you know, you have to remember that and let the community know that. And I just had a meeting with a tribal community and we had to tell them, like, it's possible the things that you guys want can't happen.
Yeah.
But we want to hear what you want because we need to know.
Yeah. Be upfront with them, like this is what I can do, this is what I can. How about anybody else?
Build relationships,
How do you do that?
reach out to people who are leaders in the neighborhood, or,
Is it a phone call? Do you pull up on them? What do you do?
Pull up on them.
Pull up. I pull up on people sometimes. Yeah, to be honest, I'll find you.
yeah,
I'm good at stalking people.
or you call and say, can I come by? Which is probably, in Texas, a good thing to do.
Yes, I forgot that part. So in DC, I pull up on people, I walk up on people. After you?
Well, I
Thank you.
attend events that they're having. I mean, I don't come as a city planner or Athena, I come as a participant. They do a 5K, I'll go do the 5K with them, you know?
How do you find out about that information?
I'm a city planner, I know everything.
You know everything.
Yeah, I keep up with everything.
They do the permits for the events, so they.
Yeah, they do permits.
So you got the end, okay,
You
gotcha.
have to, yeah, I usually have the inside knowledge. But, yeah, like, if they have an event, I'll go ahead and go. They have First Friday. I'll go shopping. I mean, I'm gonna go shopping anyway. I'll just go and see
I
what's
love
a little. And so my face is becoming recognizable as somebody in the community. They all thought I lived there, and I'm like, I don't even live here, but.
She doesn't even go here.
No, that's, well, how come you know, how come you get all these events? I go, well, you're a city planner, but okay, but, and I like the events, and it helps me get to know people, what they're interested in. And, you know, sometimes that small talk gives you more knowledge than anything, so.
I'm not a planner, I'm a planning and zoning commissioner, but the way that I build trust is to be transparent about the process and what the possible outcomes of the process can be, instead of, you know, ultimately telling them, oh, this can happen, you can stop this, you know, daycare center from locating in your neighborhood. Sometimes it's bad news that you have to deliver, so that when they're looking at the process, they have all of the possible outcomes, so they go into it with a more realistic view, and then good or bad, whatever happens, you don't lose your credibility. You have to be transparent.
Yeah. You're not always gonna say what people wanna hear.
Right. I
And
mean,
you
you
also-
wanna be
yeah.
Superman
You do, Superwoman, but.
or Superwoman, but it's not always possible, and it's not always honest to present that.
Yeah, but I've learned that you gain respect when you do tell people what the truth is. You might hurt them, but you tell people the truth. Thank you for everybody for sharing. I just wanted to end with, challenge you the next time that you go into the community or next time you get your next project, to stop and think about the narratives that you have already created, the energy that you're going to bring to the process, whether that's to your client or to the community, and then the language that you use. So thank you. Thank you. It's underneath my bed. Should put it back.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all again for hanging around for the last panel. We know that we are in between you all and the drink, so thank you for bearing with us. So just again, my name is Wafia Murray. I'm with the City of Philadelphia's Office of Transportation and Infrastructure. I am not a planner. And I manage a nonprofit called the Better Bike Share Partnership, where we work to incorporate equity and outreach and bike share systems nationally. And so what I'm going to talk about is how when you implement a lot of the ideas that we talked about, when you have a project that implements equity from the very beginning and in an intentional way, that you do get positive outcomes. So, we talked a lot about relationship building and trust, and we also talked about the history of transportation projects. There are projects that have been implemented decades ago and currently that were built to segregate cities as opposed to connecting them. And so with that, transportation to some people is a long history of mistrust and disadvantagement. And so when you go into communities and you talk to them about transportation projects, there's often a wall up. And it's not necessarily because they think your project is bad or they don't like what you're saying, but they're like, this isn't for me. They're not coming here for me, they're coming to, separate it. And so understanding that you have to acknowledge that past history, and you really have to work on building those relationships and building that trust before you can even start trying to, implement projects. Once you get that trust and that relationship building and people understand that you're here to do what you say and say what you mean, then it helps the process work out better. But you need to understand that and implement that from the very beginning. Community engagement. So I wanna put an emphasis on meaningful community engagement, because you can have community engagement, but it can be very, check the box. We talked about no more 2 p.m. meetings. I also want to add no more 2 p.m. meetings in downtown Center City where your office is, when the community that you're working with is a train riding the boat away from that. You can't always expect people to come to you. Sometimes you have to meet people where they are and come to their community. Why should I trust you to put a project in my community when you can't even come in my community? You need to walk around and see firsthand some of the things that we're experiencing to really get a sense of what our community is. And then you can work to do some meaningful community engagement. And then we also talked about, some would say attending events in other communities. You don't always have to plan, you don't always have to plan a meeting. There are events and activities and things that happen in communities all the time. Try to, be a part of some of those events that happen. Try to, see if you can get a couple of minutes on a community meeting that's taking place. Work with that community to see how you can integrate that, to be able to have some meaningful community engagement. And try to make it fun too. Meetings don't always have to be, just a PowerPoint and you're spilling out all this information. Try to make it interactive, try to make it fun. Try to, bring in games and ideas and things like that to help make the process a little more understandable and a bit easier to grasp. And then we also talked about outlining expectations. So making sure that, you're giving people some type of framework of what you can offer and of what you can't. Maybe even sharing some of the trade-offs. Sometimes you may be working, maybe with transportation and people are saying that they want the buses to come faster. Well, maybe in order to get that, we had to, stop maybe at every other block as opposed to every block. But maybe to having those conversations to help people understand a little bit more about what goes into the transportation process. So, implement feedback. I heard that when we were doing the discussion, I was in my seat like, yes. Because that is such an important part. You want to be able to implement the feedback that you're given, and figure out ways that you can help address some of the needs and the concerns that the community is facing. So I work very closely with the bike share program in Philadelphia, and bike share programs help the bike share programs in other cities to incorporate access and equity. And so before we even launched our bike share program, we did a lot of that community engagement, attending events, talking to people about, what is bike share? How do you feel about biking? How do you feel about biking in the community? And through those conversations, we were able to learn, some of the barriers that some people have to biking or bike share. One of the kind of barriers was affordability. So $17 a month for some people is affordable, but depending on what your income is like, $17 a month can be a barrier. So it's important to have those flexible payment options so that you meet the needs of everyone. The whole idea of equity is being able to serve everyone depending on what their status is. So if you're only serving the majority, then you're not doing equity to the fullest. So we used some of their feedback and we implemented programs. Education was a big piece. People were like, I would love to use bike share, but I haven't ridden a bike in years. I don't really know how to do it safely. I don't even know where I would go. So we offer classes to teach people, the rules of the road, how to use bike share safely. We also do community rides to show people where they can use biking, how it can be a tool in their daily lives if they choose to. Community. So, a point that I really want to bring across is understanding that communities are powerful. They are very powerful. A lot of times people assume that, communities, they can't get it together or they can't do this, but that is false. There are systems and programs and mechanisms set in place in communities that you may not know about because you're not from that community, so they're like, why should I give you the tea? But there's so much power in communities, and so don't assume that you need to come in and be a savior, but more so come in and say, what type of programs do you have going on, or what are some of the needs in your community, and how can we provide some tools or access to help address some of those issues. Sometimes you may have a program that can meet some of the needs, but you won't know that unless you have that conversation. So something we do with our bike share program is we work with community champions. We pay them, because it's important to pay people for their time. We pay them to help, connect us to organizations and programs throughout the community to get people engaged in the bike share program. And through that, we get some of the most amazing events and rides that I would have never thought of because, I'm not there every day in that community. So some examples of things is we partnered with a couple of community gardens in the area who have free community gardens. People can come and get affordable fruits and vegetables and healthy foods. And so we partnered with them to do a community ride ride into each of the community gardens in the area to show people this is where you can get healthy resources in your community, this is how you can get there in an affordable and healthy way with bike share. We did a ride highlighting lupus awareness because that was a big thing in one of the communities. We did a ride doing a mural tour and highlighting some of the murals and graffiti art throughout the community and highlighting some of that. So figuring out how biking can be a tool in someone's life. It may not be the same way that it fits into your life, but how does it fit into theirs? And how can you help, how can biking or other things be a tool to meet some of the other needs of the community? Representation is very important. We talked a lot about marketing and communication. You know, you can have a program, but if you don't market it and communicate it, then who knows about the program that you're offering? But also that representation is important. People need to see themselves in what you're doing and in your product. They need to see themselves through, you know, if it's a coffee shop, all right, I wanna go to a coffee shop, I wanna hear, you know, R&B, slow jazz. I mean, I wanna hear pop rock all day, or maybe they do, but making sure that they go in there and they feel represented and they feel comfortable. Making sure that if you have advertising for a project that you're doing, that, you know, you invite some people from the community to be a part of that project so they can see themselves. And also showing how people from, you know, different backgrounds, different interests, how they can fit into your project as well. And that representation is not just important in your marketing, but it's important in your leadership and who's at your table. So a lot of times when organizations have leadership and they look around the table and everybody looks the same. I'm in a meeting sometimes, everybody may look the same, come from the same background, went to the same school, we're all planners, everybody's all planners, and you end up coming up with the same ideas. Duh, because everybody is exactly the same, and you all have the same shared experience, lived experience. I'm not a planner, but I know that in order for me to get certain projects done, I need a planner on my team and at my table. And vice versa, there's certain things that planners want to get done, but they need my expertise in community engagement and outreach and program management to do that. Also, important to have like that diversity. You want, and it doesn't just help your program, but it helps your organization. It helps you to be innovative. It helps you to constantly have new and creative ideas, and it helps you to reach more people. And I just want to say, don't be afraid. I know, you know, when we talk about equity, it can be, you know, oh, I'm nervous, you know, when you start talking about things like race and class and structure, people get afraid and people get nervous, but you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable if you're going to do this work. You have to, you know, we talked about checking that stuff at the door, so it's not just for this presentation, but when you're going out in communities, you have to really check some of that personal stuff at the door and really understand that it's okay to be uncomfortable, because a lot of these communities are living with uncomfortable situations and circumstances every day. So, you know, check that at the door. Don't be afraid and don't let that hold you back, because when you really, you know, lean into this and do it in a meaningful way, you get great results. And then lastly, I just want to share, we have some helpful resources for those that are looking to do, you know, community engagement or engaging with youth for different communities and different groups. We have some resources on our website, so I would recommend you check out the Better Bike Partnership website or the Ride Hill website. Thank you.
Now,